Well, hello again. My name is Venerable Sister Kema, Reverend Sister Kema, and we've been talking about Paticca Samuppada, the dependent arising that the Buddha taught. Some people call this dependent origination, where one of the parts depends on the part just before it in order for it to arise. And this means when the sense doors work, they operate by having the eye, for instance, make contact with a form and eye consciousness arise, and then what happens is contact happens. And when this happens, then a feeling arises. So because the six sense doors are there, because they are, contact happens. And with the contact as condition, feeling happens. And with feeling as condition, craving happens. And with craving as condition, clinging happens. So we're going to just do a very quick review about what we did in part one, about some new words that we learned, some vocabulary words, just so that you would understand and remember what we were saying. We said that for this journey of understanding this process, we would need a few words. And the words we identified were, first, meditation will be the vehicle that we use on this journey to see how everything works. And then mindfulness, that will be the engine which runs the vehicle, helps it to go. It's hooked together. And then delusion is what causes the trouble in the engine. Very often that's what happens when you don't understand. The ignorance and the delusion cause the problem for this engine to operate. Craving causes the misfiring in the engine. It makes it get excited and sputter, and it gets it off center so the engine doesn't run. And purification of mind is what was recommended by the Buddha. This is like cleaning out the valves in the engine, and retraining the mind is how we repair the engine. That's how we do the work of repairing the engine. So meditation, what we said is we're going to practice observing the movements of mind's attention in order to see precisely how mind's attention is moving. Mind doesn't move. I once had someone tell me, mind doesn't move, sister. That's not right. Well, you're right. Mind is right here and it sits still. But mind's attention jumps around. And in Theravada Buddhism, we call this like monkey mind, where it's jumping all over the place. And you personally, you don't have any control over this. So we practice observing the movements of mind's attention in order to see clearly how this is actually working. It's actually a pretty simple meditation. Once we get started, I think you'll really enjoy doing it because you can do it all the time. And just like anything that you want to become an expert in, if you do it all the time, you're going to become an expert at it. If you're training to become a doctor, you're going to do medicine all the time for a period of time before you can become a doctor. If you're going to become an expert in the field of engine construction, that's all you're going to do for a long period of time to become the expert. So it makes sense if we give you a simple meditation you can apply very deeply in a retreat, very deeply by yourself at home, but you can actually keep doing it all the time. So this mindfulness is when you remember during the practice to keep observing this way that we're going to show you, and you do it all the time. And it's also remembering what to do when something pulls you away. The delusion was the third word, and the delusion is what prevents us from fixing this engine. It is what keeps us from carrying out our solution of fixing and revitalizing the engine so we know exactly what we're doing and making it run. And the root cause of the arising tension and tightness is tripped off. The craving is tripped off by the existence of this delusion, this idea of everything that's happening is me. It's all my fault. I'm to blame. Everything is happening to me. Did you ever feel like that in life? Everything is happening to me. That is the delusion. In truth, everything is happening from you outward. You actually choose the view that you are going to see. You know, have you ever had anybody go to a movie and you see the movie, you think it's a great movie. They see a movie, they think it's terrible. People perceive things different ways. So you actually have a perception that happens. And what we're trying to do is show you how the Buddha actually taught people they could change by choice how they're going to perceive the world. Okay? So this is what delusion is. Now, craving, it's an interesting thing. If we know that craving is the root of suffering, don't you think that if that's what you're supposed to get rid of, I should be able to tell you what is craving? If I cannot say distinctly what craving is, how in the world am I supposed to tell you how to get rid of it? That makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. So craving has a symptom, we said, that comes up every single time in the same way. And craving always manifests as arising tension and tightness in the mind, in the body. It is the I don't like it or the I like it mind, and this is where clinging comes right after it. Here's the craving. I don't like it, and here's the clinging. I don't like it because blah, 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 blah. All the reasons why you don't like it. And the clinging makes everything grow worse. And there is a Pali term that is called the papancha. You see the trees behind me, and these trees that are behind me, they have trunks that go up, but they have lots of branches and lots of complicated design. That's the papancha. That is the clinging that goes on. And actually that's more and more and more of these little tiny dependent origination circles happening over and over again. Well, the Buddha uncovered this clue about the tension and tightness. He told us, I'm going to tell you. Nobody else that's teaching right now is telling you. I'm going to tell you. This is how this works. There is this craving that arises, and you have to be able to identify it, and then he's going to show you how that you can let go of it. So the place we left off last time, we're going to start right now, is we need to look at this medically. Look at what this means medically, in medical terms for us today. Are there things that are going on in our society that are being caused by what I'm talking about? And one of the root causes we found for a lot of diseases, a lot of things that are happening for our minds and for our bodies, is tension, is the seed that develops into what's called a stress disorder. And then if the person is diagnosed in the stress disorder, a lot of times this develops into something else. The stress disorder can develop into a depressive disorder, or which is a mental situation, or it can develop into a cancer in the body. It can develop into a heart condition in the body. It can develop into a gastrointestinal problem in the body. So these depressions and these kinds of stress disorders are what now the medical community is finally coming around and saying, this is the root cause of everything. Our lifestyle has a lot to do with this. But this is what's causing the disease of the mind and of the body. Then there happens all of the sorrow, the lamentation, the pain, the grief, and the despair that the Buddha talked about when he talked about suffering. He didn't just say, oh, you know, there's suffering. Well, I know there is, and you do too. And I'm telling you, there's suffering. He didn't do that. He said, what is the suffering specifically? And in one sutta, he decided to explain paragraph for each one of these terms: lamentation, pain, sorrow, grief, and despair. The sorrow, the lamentation, the pain, the grief, and despair. And he had a paragraph to explain each one of these. So he really spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the problem was before he went any farther with the solution. Now, he told us that the thing we needed to do was we needed to purify the mind. Purification of mind is what he wanted us to concentrate on. So purification of mind, what does that mean? It means basically shifting unwholesome mind states over to wholesome mind states. This is what he maintained. But it doesn't help you, does it, unless I tell you what a wholesome is and an unwholesome. So we've already talked about this, and I bet you can guess. The unwholesome one is the one where the mind state is there and you have tension and tightness. You can see this in the person's face. You can see the stress, the concern, the grief, the sorrow, everything happening in the person's face, the tension, the seriousness, okay? The wholesome state, the wholesome mind state, is a much lower level of tension, or the no tension state with clear thinking happening. Because why? Because when there's tension and tightness in your mind, you can't think clearly. Have you ever had a situation where everything, like somebody, one thing that happens most people can identify with is a member of the family dies and just everybody falls apart. Because everybody's going in a different direction of, this has happened, and they can't think about what to do next. And then somebody in the family will show up that's a little more grounded to help the situation. At home, we used to call this person the rock. The rock will show up, and they'll say, Mama, please sit down. Daddy, sit down. John, come with me. We're going to go and talk to the mortuary or the funeral home. We're going to take care of everything. This person is the rock. How can they do that in a situation like this? They have enough balance, enough clarity, clear mind to see what essentially is happening in the situation. And I'm not saying they won't get upset later, but in the situation itself, that person is the person who has clear thinking to figure out what to do to take care of what is essential and not get upset at the wrong, when it's not time yet, you see? When the person's gone, there's plenty of time to get upset, but when you have all these arrangements, if they're not done in advance, you have to be able to have somebody there who's the rock. And this person is a grounded person. Their head is clear because of that. Now, what is the nature of the actual goal that we keep talking about? It's a state in Buddhism. We talk about it. We call it nibbana. But what it is in any situation for any person's life, whether you're Buddhist or not, you're attempting to become balanced as a person, mentally and physically, with no tension and tightness in the mind or the body. To stop taking things personally and have no urgency about life. That means you come to the present moment and you handle this present moment very nicely. You handle this present moment, and when it goes there, then you handle the next present moment and you handle the next present moment. It sounds impossible, but it's not impossible if we understand how this is all working. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to reach a calm state of extreme balance with no tension and tightness in the mind and the body. So retraining the mind was what the Buddha recommended. And we have to know, what did he mean by that? Obviously what he meant was the goal of the meditator, or the person who practices retraining their mind from where it gets upset all the time. That person is to create a new and wholesome habit of letting go and relaxing all the tension and tightness in their mind and in their body. Now, one time a man called me and he said, I don't want to have any habits at all. I thought we were supposed to get rid of all habitual tendencies and opinions and views and everything. And I'm there, I don't know who told you that, but as a human being, you have a set perspective. You have a set of views. You have a set of mind states. This is a medical existing fact for the human being. You get to decide, remember we talked last time about you actually what you do in the present moment affects what happens to you in the future. So if you decide, let it go. This is here now. Relax. What can you do about it right now? I'll give you a perfect example. I was traveling across the country in upstate New York a couple of years ago, and driving a brand new truck. And I pulled in with the person that I was carrying across part of the country. I pulled in to get a cup of coffee. There was a highway going this way on one side and a highway going this way on this side, and the restaurants were right in the middle. So I pulled in from my side and I parked the truck. I went in, had a cup of coffee, and the other person did too. And then when we came outside, I walked up to the truck first, and I just stood there and I looked at the truck and I went, yep, it's a truck. It's a truck. And the other person came out and looked at the truck and went, yeah, it's a truck. It's a truck. That's what it is. You see, the problem was there was somebody parked next to the truck. And when they pulled out, they crunched the side of the truck from the front all the way to the back of the truck, and there was a dent about this deep in the whole side of that truck. When we went in, we had a new truck. When we came out, we had a truck with a dent in the side of it. The truth when we went in was we had a truck. And then when the truth was when we came out, there was a truck with a dent in the side of it. And the reaction was funny because neither of us got upset at all about this. We just kind of smiled and went, you beat that. There's a truck with a dent in the side of it. And the person who did this never stopped, never said anything. There was nobody for us to call, no place for us to go with this. No, getting upset would have proved absolutely nothing. Having our heart rate increase or anything, no good at all, because the person was on the other side of the highway and they went that way, and who knows where they were? Who even knows who did it? Nobody does. So I looked at the truck and I said, is there anything pressing the tire? We looked at it. I said, no, there's nothing pressing on the tire. Let's just go. So we got back in the truck and we went another 200 miles and we stopped. But the point is, we could have gotten very emotionally upset over a brand new truck that wasn't a new truck anymore and had this big, dent in the side of it. But there's no point to it. So you have a choice in your perspective of this. Isn't it funny, or is it a disaster? Is it the end of the world? Am I really angry? Okay, but what good does it do me? And how many times do we actually stop and think about that kind of thing? You see what I mean? Okay, so this goal is to try to have a wholesome habitual tendency of letting go of all this tension and this tightness in your mind and in your body. And this opens the mind up, creating a new and spacious area for thinking about wholesome, creative solutions for peaceful coexistence. Everybody talks about peace. I've been to lots of peace rallies in Washington, D.C. Everybody's running around with placards. Everybody's screaming and yelling. Everybody's complaining about the government and stamping their feet. Do you honestly think this does any good at all? Really, it takes a long time for that kind of thing to do any good at all. But if there was reasoning, if there were people who understood how things were working emotionally, maybe we would be in a position where we could all sit down and maybe 20 minds together could think of ideas that could be put together into some kind of a creative, cooperative solution for survival on the globe. But it doesn't seem that people understand this. But this is what the Buddha was talking about. Did the Buddha present a solution for this situation? He did, and let's put this slide up, okay? This slide tells us that he did find a mind development program he thought of that was very simple in the beginning when he was first teaching. The Buddhist solution was to release the atta perspective, that's the delusion, and to shift the mind to live with an anatta perspective. How do you do this? Well, it's called a system of right effort. Right effort is one of the folds in the eightfold path. If something's folded like this together and we open it up, we don't just take a few of them and put them over here and work on just these. They're all hooked together. So these 8 pieces are folds like in a fan. They're all hooked together. And one of those folds is called right effort, okay? Now, right effort is an easy practice for anybody to keep going all the time. The first thing that you do is you need to learn how to recognize when the tension and tightness arises, and you release that, and then you relax. Then you re-smile, just a tiny smile. It's just a tiny smile on your face. It's not even with your mouth open. It's raising the corners of your mouth. It's like that. Like that. And it's nice because you'll end up with wrinkles that said you had a smile someday, instead of ending up with wrinkles that said you had the whole life as a frown. So I think about that. You might not think about that, but I think about that sometimes. So having the corners of your mouth up just a little bit, but it's not about that. It's about the brain. Neurologically, what we know about the brain is we have 2 lobes that come together like this. Now, in the top part of the brain, these 2 lobes are encased in what's called the meninges. It's a tiny sac-like structure, like saran wrap, that covers these 2 lobes of the brain and helps the fluid to stay inside. Now, what we know is that when you get a headache or you have a really bad pain from your head that radiates from the back of your head up like this to the front, what's happening is these lobes are very tight together, okay? And when they're tight together, it's agony. It can be migraine time, it can be neck pain time, it can be headache time. But if you smile slightly, it helps you to separate these just the tiniest bit, not a whole lot like this, but just a tiny bit. And in between these 2 lobes is something that we do not fully understand yet. We have the pineal gland, which is sitting inside these 2 lobes. There has been a great deal written about the history of the pineal gland, what it does, what it has to do with the opening of the mind, what it has to do with the transcendence of mind, all kinds of things. Medically, we still don't totally understand the pineal gland. But we do know that if you relax, if you smile just a little, this smile triggers a release, opens up these 2, and if you lower the tension in your body enough when you are practicing, as you develop this, you will be able to feel the separation opening up slightly. And you'll feel this kind of spaciousness feeling happening. And you'll want to drop down further and deeper in your meditation because you feel this opening happening, just delightful kind of opening and relaxing. Well, this is an easy practice to do. It's recognize, release, relax, re-smile, return, and repeat. That's the cycle. So it's recognize, release, relax, re-smile, return, repeat. Recognize, release, relax, re-smile, return, repeat. I had the kids singing this in the Sunday school the other day, and they all said they could remember it. And if they can remember it, I know that you can remember it, and you can try it. So right effort is these 4 steps. It's a skeleton practice that sits underneath the other meditations. It's internally right there. And sometimes what happens is, although we recognize something is pulling us away, what we tend to do is when it pulls us away, we release it and just come right back, like I told you in the last part of this. But what you want to be sure you do in the beginning of your training is that when you release it, just let it fall out of your hand. Then you want to relax and let go. Then re-smile, return, repeat. That's the secret to this thing. He had this extra step of tranquilization. In Pali, we call this pasambaya, is the word that comes in the Anapanasati Sutta and Satipatthana Sutta. So we want to, don't skip this, don't separate it. We don't know when it started that they put them together, but we do know it doesn't work. And we know that at that point there probably was a decline in the progression of attainments. And so what you want to do is you want to keep that in mind. Each cycle that you do of that practice is revealing the 4 Noble Truths to you. It's showing you this dependent arising and the three characteristics of existence. Now, let me just brief you, but the Four Noble Truths are: there is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, there is a cessation of suffering, and there is a way to the cessation of suffering, okay? And when you practice this practice, you are seeing the suffering, you are noticing the cause, which is the tension and tightness, is the seed to this, okay? You are experiencing the cessation when you release and relax. And if you look very carefully, you will actually see what it is, that no craving, no clinging, and cessation actually is a real state. And that's when the student gets excited. That's when they come and say, I saw it. I didn't think it was real. I thought you talked about it in the suttas, but I didn't think it was real. I thought it was just something, I didn't think it was real. They kept saying that, but it is real. And you only have to see it for a split second, and if you notice it's something entirely different from the way you were sitting, there's nothing happening. Mind is not tight, body is not tight, there's no I in there at all saying, but there's nothing there. That's the release. That's the total release. Each time we practice, we complete the Eightfold Path completely too. We exercise the principal parts of the Dhamma each time that we're doing this, okay? So it's real important that we understand that this is how all of the energy happens. All of the energy builds up in these little steps from the sense door all the way over to when the contact, feeling, craving, clinging happens and the birth of action. Remember, we were talking a little bit. You can put up the screen for one of these slides. Okay, so each time we do this cycle, it reveals the Four Noble Truths and the dependent origination, which are the cycle, as I was saying, of the contact, feeling, craving, clinging, habitual tendency, and birth of action. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit in our next part here. For just a minute, I want to talk to you about when you are doing the meditation, a couple of interesting points about setting yourself up to do the meditation when you start. First of all, when we talk about the meditation, this all came initially, the Buddhism came out of Asia. And in Asia, traditionally, people sat on the floor. So, of course, everybody was writing about cross-legged beneath a tree. That's how you should sit. But one day, I was sitting on the floor, and I started knocking on the floor just to find out if there was anybody down there that was going to tell me how to do this properly, and nobody answered. And I figured out there's no secret in the floor. So what exactly was the Buddha doing? When he was practicing, he was actually watching mind. He was, this is a mind yoga. He's watching, instead of the positions of the body in Hatha yoga, he's looking at the position of mind's attention as it moves here and there. This is what he was doing. So he's a mind yogi. Now, when he sat on the floor because traditionally that's what he did. But the whole idea was, because he was examining mind, the most important part of the meditation is when you sit, don't move. This was the actual reality. If it's comfortable for you to sit on the floor, then sit on the floor, but don't move at all. Don't wiggle your fingers, don't wiggle your toes, don't twist your body. If I say to you, promise me you'll sit for 30 minutes minimum each time, just 30 minutes, okay? It doesn't count if you start to change your position and you have to go like this, and you're sitting for 3 minutes and you have to change your position and go like this, okay? And that doesn't count. And we used to go to our teacher and say, he'd say, did you sit for your 30 minutes today? And I would say, well, yes. Well, how long was it for you to be on your mind's attention before your mind's attention moved away from what you wanted it to be on? And I'd say, well, it moved about every minute. And he said, what was happening? Well, I had to change positions. And then I had a scratch, and then I had some fly that came around my head. I had to get rid of that. And then I had to straighten my robe. And then I sat. He said, no, you don't understand. You sat for 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. I wanted you to sit for 30 minutes. So what I want you to do is I want you to be able to experience what happens if you are absolutely still and you don't move at all. As a matter of fact, you can move as much as this Buddha moves. This is how much you can move. If the Buddha moves that is in front of you, that's how much you can move. Uh-oh. Okay. But what I wanted to tell you about this was that it's really, really important not to move at all so that you can begin to notice the tension that's in your body, and you can begin to notice when mind's attention moves off somewhere else. That's what's really important. Okay? So sitting in a comfortable position where there is no pain, pain. Well, there's two kinds of pain. There's a physical pain and there's a meditation pain. How do I know what's the difference? Okay, it's easy, I'll tell you. When you're sitting in meditation, if you get up and you start to walk between sitting a half hour and another half hour, and the pain goes away just like that, that was a meditation pain. But if you are sitting in the wrong position and your knee really starts to hurt, or your hip or your back, and you get up and walk and you're hobbling around and it doesn't go away, that is somebody ringing a bell saying it's time that you change the sitting position you're in. You're putting stress on your body. This is a physical pain. This is something that is real from your body, not a mental pain. So there's a difference between a mental pain and a physical pain, even though it feels like it's in the body. You can have a burning in the arm, you can have a burning in the stomach or in the back, but it can end up being a meditation pain. Okay, it'll disappear. And next time it comes up, you can sit through that perfectly safely. Okay, now we're going to stop right now. This is the end of part 2. And in the next one, we will review the sitting position, and about moving, we'll talk about the pain. And we're going to go right into what happens when you meditate, what is actually happening, and if things go wrong, how can we fix that? And there's some very simple ways that the Buddha gave us as solutions that he showed us how we could fix things. So I'm going to let you go today, and remember, don't move any more than the Buddha moves. Okay?